wanted to start off by introducing you all to Matt Warren, who's the Executive Director of Cross Point Church. He has just a few words to share.
All right, everybody buckle up. We're going to preach. Just kidding. We're honored to host you guys. We've been members of the East Bank community since 2013, and we love doing ministry and living our church life in this community. So we're honored to host Metro Planning Commission, and we're honored to host you guys as our community. And I'll be around all night. If there's any questions about the church, we were damaged by the tornado, and I've had a couple conversations with Sean, and it's been a lot of recovery. I'm sure a lot of you guys were affected as well in this community, and so it's been a tough road. So I'm excited to see what the Planning Commission has come in based on the comments from the community, and we're anxiously waiting to see how this turns out. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Lucy.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you so much for hosting us in this beautiful facility that apparently continues to get rebuilt and is damaged and rebuilt and is growing back stronger. So we really appreciate you hosting us this evening. And I want to acknowledge Councilman Sean Parker, whose district this is in, and Councilman Withers, who is in an adjoining district, but also part of the study area. So it's been really phenomenal to work with you both and to learn from you and to hopefully better understand your neighborhoods and communities through you. And so we're grateful to you. Welcome to the community meeting tonight to talk about the East Bank. This is such a fundamental and exceptional opportunity to build a superb neighborhood and community within East Nashville along our riverfront. It's a humbling responsibility to guide this planning process, but we are doing it well through you. And so tonight you're going to see some preliminary concepts for public feedback. So we're here to listen. We're going to show you some drawings and some concepts, and we want to hear from you and determine if we're going in the right direction. And so be just as honest and direct as you can. That way that we will be able to take your feedback and refine our work and improve the work that we do here today. And so again, it's been a privilege to lead the planning effort here. Anna Greider has done an outstanding job. She jumped into the deep end of the ocean, thank you, on this project because this area has a lot of core planning opportunities that are very distinctive, but some challenges that other neighborhoods don't have. And so we're doing the kind of planning work here, I think that is something to be very proud of. And so I'm grateful to you, Anna, for all of your hard work and want to thank the planning team as well for joining us and supporting us this evening. And so with that, we'll hand it over.
Thank you, Lucy. All right. Just a few logistics. If you do need the restrooms, they are just out and to your left. So here is our agenda tonight. I'm Anna Greider with the Planning Department and have had the opportunity to project manage the East Bank study. So if you've been at any of our previous meetings or events, you've probably had to listen to me at those. So lucky you, here we are again. So we're going to go through the feedback that we've heard, kind of an overview of all that we've heard since we started this process really in earnest in April, and then talk about how we've taken that feedback and crafted it into some very early concepts to share and to get feedback on. And if you have one of these smartphone devices, we will be using that tonight to get some initial feedback. Don't worry if you don't have your phone, we have paper copies, and staff, when we get to that point, will be able to pass those out so you can still participate. Similarly, if you're online, you can participate online with your phone. So we'll go through some concepts and get some initial feedback, but that feedback period will be open for quite some time. So if folks aren't here tonight, the recording of tonight's meeting and the slides from tonight will be up later this week on the website, and folks can participate during that time when it's convenient for them. Then Lucy will come back up to talk about what's next for this process, and then we will have a community Q&A, so be kind of mulling over your questions as we're presenting, and myself and Lucy and the council member Parker and Withers will be back up here to help answer your questions tonight. So let's get started with what we've heard. And many of you have probably seen this timeline a few times now, but it is an overview of this first phase of work for the study with a summary of all the different public engagement opportunities that we've had along the way. In terms of numbers, that has turned into 18 public meetings, I guess 19 if you want to count tonight. We've had 3 online surveys. We have a huge email subscription list, and if you're not on that, please sign up at our website, eastbankstudy.nashville.gov. Multiple meetings with all the property owners on the East Bank, and a lot of technical meetings. A lot of technical meetings with a lot of relevant agencies who have infrastructure or utilities or other pieces of equipment over here on the East Bank that we have to work with as we're going through this visioning process. So that was a very quick summary of a lot of engagement that we've done, but it has boiled down to these 4, what we've called top concerns, but 4 areas of input from the community that the community has asked us to dive into in more detail and think of creative design solutions for the future of the East Bank. I will note that none of these 4 say, please don't do anything, we love it how it is. And that has not been something that we've heard. We have definitely heard that there is a desire to see the space on the East Bank utilized more, be more available for the community, and be more than parking lots. And so the top concerns are better, safer, and easier connectivity, riverfront access, and resiliency, meaning coping with floodplain and flooding concerns, having destinations for Nashvillians, and equity and affordability. So I'm going to take each of these top concerns, show you snapshots of the feedback, and then show you how we've been trying to take that feedback and meet with the relevant agencies that work in each of these arenas to come up with some concepts for the East Bank. So better, safer, and easier connectivity. And here are some quotes on here from our Multimodal Survey, which was the most recent survey we just had in October. So as many of you I'm sure are familiar, this is the street grid that we have today on the East Bank. Very disjointed, not intuitive at all, very tricky to get through today, would become much more trickier to get through if the level of development that we see throughout Nashville and anticipate for the East Bank does arrive. So a key issue already is connectivity, which will be exacerbated if we don't do anything about that in development comes. And within that context, on your left, is that your left? Yes. Half square mile of downtown and then a half square mile of the East Bank gives a picture of the street network and the things you can't see underground, which is all the utilities that help make a functioning city. So even if we anticipate just a quarter or a third of what we have downtown to come to the East Bank, there's a lot of work to be done to be set up for that. So back in our May meeting, we had some big picture questions about what challenges exist on the East Bank today. A lot of that was focused on the bridges and the obstacles that the bridges are, the lack of walkability, a lack of bike lanes, how car-centric it is. We then took that feedback and asked a little deeper about circulation and mobility in our summer workshops. So asked folks to map for us how they move around the East Bank. I think it's really telling that you can see, I'm not sure if my mouse is showing up, but that gap in the middle. These thick red lines are the streets that are most used, and then there's a big gap in the middle that needs to be addressed, that needs to have functionality for the community. So to take that even further, we released the October Multimodal Survey. It had over 500 responses. One of our questions, is it important to build new street connections on the East Bank? 76% said yes. So many of you may have seen lately the conceptual alignment for a multimodal boulevard, which is the concept we showed back in July of diving into how we do increase north-south connectivity on the East Bank. And this was one of the key questions that the planning department asked when they were scoping to hire consultants to help us with this work. And so the survey asked, what would you most prefer the design of a new north-south spine to make possible? The top 3 responses were more spaces to walk and bike, landscaping that buffers the pedestrian and cyclists from the road, and dedicated transit lanes. So for each of these components, since we got these results at the end of October, we've been evaluating these with TDOT, with NDOT, with the bike community, with Greenways, to really discuss and think about solutions for what can happen on the East Bank when we do have a lot of very significant obstacles with, particularly with the bridges, whether it's James Robertson, Woodland, Jefferson, the CSX bridge, KVB, the interstate. How can we make some of the things that the community desires work in a very constrained part of our community? So we have a couple of concepts to show related to that to see if we're on the right track, but it is definitely very deeply technical work that we're still taking on, but these were the top three requests from the community for that boulevard. So we will be bringing more detailed and more refined work to you as we've met more with groups like Walk Back Nashville and others who really work in this space. So interestingly, we asked, do you walk or bike in the East Bank study area for leisure today? And over 70% said often or sometimes, which was kind of surprising because it's not, there are portions on the East Bank that are enjoyable to be around. But once you have gone through Cumberland Park and enjoyed the front of the stadium, there is not a whole lot else. And so it was interesting that so many people already do enjoy the East Bank. And so there's a great audience there today, which would only grow if we had better facilities. So even though there's 76 or so % that do come sometimes or often, very few feel safe or comfortable while doing it. So I don't know if that's a credit to the grit and determination of Nashvillians or something else, but that's another area for work to be done in. If folks are going to walk and bike on the East Bank, we want it to be safe and comfortable. So how do we get to that point? And then a priority question, what are your mobility priorities? So sidewalks, greenways, and bike lanes, again, very important. And the idea of transit-oriented development around a new boulevard, 80% supported that idea. So we took, as you can see, kind of layers and layers of input from the community, starting with kind of big picture word clouds into hands-on workshops and then into a more focused and detailed survey to get some guidance and direction around that vision for a new boulevard. And so in order to get that, we started discussions with TDOT to help us address the right-of-way needs for the future of a boulevard and how do we bring that to fruition. So those are very ongoing, deeply technical conversations with a lot of traffic engineers and trained people in this space, but it's great to have TDOT on board as a partner who can really help leverage Metro's money and time to bring this to reality. So, and that's just one part of what we've been pursuing on the multimodal side of things, multiple conversations with a lot of different transportation agencies to envision the future of that boulevard. And once we get to the emerging concepts, hopefully, rather than me talking, you'll get to see a sketch that will kind of put some visuals to my words. So next topic was riverfront access and resiliency. So very important, acknowledging the floodplain in the area and acknowledging the desire from the community to be able to engage with the Cumberland River, especially on the East Bank, and not turn our backs to it, but to enjoy it and really feel that it's a river that runs through our downtown and not just one that separates the East from downtown. So we started with kind of big picture questions around what do you want to see for the East Bank, greenways and gardens and bike paths, into a detailed survey with the boating community, over 450 responses to reasons why boaters might go downtown today, might go downtown in the future, and how they use the facilities and what the kind of audience and desire is from the boating community. Into our summer workshops, where we got people to think about how you view the Cumberland River today, essentially as a divider and as an underutilized place to pass over rather than to enjoy. To get a sense of what people are concerned about from an environmental perspective with the Cumberland River. And then ideas around what would make the river more appealing to the community, more appreciated as a resource, with waterfront dining and greenways, walking paths and stormwater filtering being the top vote getters there. So we've taken a lot of that feedback and begun conversations with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who are doing some flood modeling for us, so we can understand from the experts the impacts on the floodplain of current and future development, elevation of streets and buildings. Those are the experts in that arena, and so we're working closely with them to understand impacts on the floodplain, researching best practices in environmental resiliency, exploring what standards Nashville could incorporate for green streets and performative landscapes, which means that they are floodable landscapes, so they function when they're dry, that folks can enjoy them, but they perform a flooding function, a stormwater function when it's wet. Destinations for Nashvillians, another one of the top concerns that we've heard from the community, that it doesn't just, we don't want the East Bank to just be an extension of Broadway, but we'd like it to be a family-friendly place where we could bring our kids, our grandparents, and enjoy the time. So we asked questions back in May about what do you like about the East Bank today? A lot of that centers around the Cumberland Park, the stadium, the views from downtown, and what would you like to see in the future? Restaurants, affordable housing, mixed-use development, greenways. We took that a little deeper in the summer, and if you were able to attend our workshops, you got the fake money, and we're able to kind of disperse that money as you please between the different concepts for public space, with nature trails being the big winner from those 4 workshops we held in the summer. And we also tried to dive into a little bit about what does it mean, destinations for Nashvillians, what is authentic to Nashville, with 5 Points, Cheekwood, and Shelby Bottoms being the preferences for places to go to be with friends that are the most beautiful, and places to relax and recharge. So giving us an idea of what special places already exist in Nashville. And then if you remember, we had a series of land use stickers that you could place on a map of the East Bank to give us a sense of the height and scale and type of uses that you would like to see on the East Bank. And these are the top 3 vote getters: mid-rise mixed use, low-rise mixed use, and live work. And so we took all of this into consideration and have begun talking about places that are authentic to Nashville, design of buildings, height of buildings, what do places look and feel like, what would a new neighborhood or neighborhoods on the East Bank feel like, and we have some concepts to share there. And then finally, equity and affordability as a key concern and a key piece of input that we've received from the community. Back in the summer workshops, we got some more word clouds about the East Bank today and the East Bank in the future, with future generations wishing to see it be accessible, inclusive, safe, affordable, clean, friendly. That was reiterated during our October Multimodal Survey with the top 3 most important topics to be addressed: affordable housing, greenways, parks, and spaces for play, and environmental sustainability and resiliency. And so we took all this feedback on equity and affordability and created a graphic to communicate how the planning department works in those arenas, knowing that planning will not be the implementer of a lot of things on the East Bank, but the planning department has the role of working with the community on establishing the vision that other departments and agencies in our city actually go and be the implementers of. And so the graphic here communicates how the planning department works in the spaces of equity and affordability through promoting equal access to the East Bank for multiple modes of transportation, so not just cars, but buses, bikes, walking. Ensures that the open space and environmental resiliency of the area, so we're not placing folks in vulnerable places. So protecting and providing access to open spaces and other vulnerable environmental features on the East Bank. Site planning and development review. So once the vision of the East Bank study is established, ensuring that when projects come through the planning department, that they're vetted against the vision that's been established by the community. And then economic and social opportunities. So investing and guiding the investment of public infrastructure and a diversity of land uses and housing types on the East Bank. So before I move into the big ideas, we have a short infographic here to really help us, remind us of the existing conditions of the East Bank today. So we have 338 acres between Jefferson Street and the interstate, between the river and the interstate on the east side. Of that 338 acres, 127 acres are parking lots today, directly across from our downtown. This is a great opportunity to utilize our space in the heart of our city in a more equitable and friendly way for our citizens. And we have no continuous north-south connection, which is why that multimodal boulevard has been such a key part of this first phase of our study. Today, of those acres, only 12.9 is park space, which is Cumberland Park, and we just have 3.6 miles of greenway. We have no housing units today on the East Bank, 4 hotels, and almost 13,000 people within a half mile of the East Bank. We have 1.7 miles of riverfront and just 0.25 of it being activated today, meaning that you could get to the river on that portion around Cumberland Park and in front of the stadium. And in that 1.7 miles, there's 3 interstate interchanges. So we took the existing conditions and the feedback from the community to break it into kind of a planner's term for our work, which is a conceptual framework. It's kind of a frame of reference within which we're categorizing things and working. So I will go through each of these, and then we'll have some concepts and sketches for you to review. So starting with the 4 walkable districts, we introduced these at our summer workshops, asked for feedback on the boundaries, and got really positive feedback on how we have divided up the East Bank, and hope to, in future phases of this work, really dig in to what is the identity of each of these districts. How is north of Railroad a different neighborhood to south of Shelby? How do they connect to the different things that they're adjacent to? And within that began very high-level sketching of what neighborhood streets and what different neighborhoods on the East Bank might feel like. How can they have wide sidewalks and green streets and bike lanes and dense housing for the future. So now we're getting into the fun part where you don't have to just listen to me anymore, but you can pull your phone out. We're going to show some of the concepts for review. These haven't been shown before, so we're excited to get your feedback. So during this section, we're going to have several questions, and I will be switching over to Mentimeter, which is the tool that we're using. If you are able to and have your phone, go to menti.com, and it will ask you to put in this code. If you don't have a phone and you would like a paper copy, raise your hand, and we have staff in the back that can bring you a paper copy. I think there's a couple of folks with hands raised. There we go. So staff will get those. Keep them raised. Staff will get you a pen and a piece of paper. Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And also on the slide, if you don't want to put the code in and your phone is close enough, you can take a picture of that QR code and the survey should pop up. If it doesn't, I apologize. You can either type the code in or you can scan the QR code, which is also easy to do. So as I said, lots of opportunities for feedback. We're going to do this tonight because it's kind of fun and interactive because we can see your participation as we go along, but this will just be the first of many opportunities and conversations to discuss the different concepts we're showing tonight. Yeah. Yes. Does anybody, as well as if you need paper, but if you just need help with the getting onto Menti, we do have staff that generally. Yeah. Yeah, definitely don't raise your hand if you're like, it's not working, or I can't do this, or can't get on the Wi-Fi. We are here to help. Okay, so I'm going to start with that Multimodal Boulevard and review. Oh, that's my little icon came up. Okay. So we began to sketch out with our consultants a conceptual street grid, which focuses around this new north-south multimodal boulevard, but also considers our major streets that go through the East Bank and connect East Nashville to downtown. And so in looking at alignments and configurations for the future of the boulevard, we looked at other examples around the country. This is in Washington, D.C., and you can't see it, but on the other side of these buildings is the river. And 7 years ago, none of this was here. And so you can see kind of the inset of before Main Avenue in Washington, D.C., and how it is today with different multiple lanes and trees and multimodal street. Here's another view of that same street. And so we looked at an existing condition on the East Bank today, South 2nd Street, looking down towards the stadium, and sketched out a concept for what that could look like in the future as a multimodal street that can move the traffic that is necessary when we have much more development on the East Bank, that can provide those wide sidewalks and a vibrant pedestrian-oriented street. So I'm going to switch over to the Mentimeter so that we can get that going, but the screen went black, so one moment. Might need technical assistance maybe, but it may have come up on your phone, the first question. It did, okay. I can't see it, but you guys can. Is it letting you answer the question? Yes, okay. Okay. So I was hoping to show you the results, but is anyone, Pull it back up. Yeah. I mean, I can see it, but. I think someone's coming to my rescue. I apologize. There's always something. So when I want to go back to the PowerPoint, you just go back to the slideshow, or I can just go back to it. Okay, but how do I change? I can't see on my left. So. You have to just look at that screen. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna look at the screen because it's not on my laptop now. Okay. Okay. So has everyone had a chance to vote? Probably because that took me so long. Okay. So how do I? Okay. No, I don't want to do that. Okay. So do you think the proposed conceptual street grid and multimodal boulevard are an improvement over existing conditions? So definitely yes, and probably yes were the most vote getters there. Okay, next question. What elements are missing from this sketch? With this one, you can type in up to three ideas, concepts, things that you see that are missing. And again, if you're having any issues, just raise your hand and staff can come help. You don't have to fill in all three if you don't want to. So I will pull up so we can see some of these results. Okay. And the bigger the word, the more times that word has been said. And so bike lanes, parking seem to be some of the big concepts on there. I'm not going to close that voting, so you can keep going as you'd like, and we will move to the next question. But feel free to keep answering that question. Oh, actually, don't answer this question. Sorry, I forgot. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, if I know how to do that. Might need the technical man again. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, if you're on the WebEx, I think Rochelle put the code for the Mentimeter into the chat. Thank you so much. Into the chat. So scroll, or the Q&A. So scroll back there if you're looking for the code for the Mentimeter, but I will pull it back up after, when we go to our next round of questions. Okay, so that was some questions and some concepts around the Multimodal Boulevard. Now we're going to talk about some of the concepts that have been emerging related to bikeways. So again, a similar map to the conceptual street grid, but this is showing existing bikeways today. And a lot of these are not protected bike lanes. These are just streets that might have a person on a bicycle striped on them, and you're sharing the street with cars. So the only real kind of protected bike lane is that one along Davidson. So this is our existing network. And we are looking and working with the bike community as to how we fill in that network and what the preferences are for those bike lanes. And so we have some questions that are very specific to the bike lanes, but I want to show a sketch, an idea for the future along the East Bank. So the idea here is of a continuous bikeway that provides an off-road trail for bikes and pedestrians that's separated from a vehicular street and that would connect with Nashville's Greenway plan. So I'm super nervous about going back to Mentimeter, but before I do that, I will share the QR code one more time for those that are virtual. So the code, you can either type in 24678684 or you can scan the picture on your screen. And we will go back to Mentimeter and answer 2 questions on bikeways. Yes. Yeah, so here's the question. What is your preference for bike lanes on the East Bank? So fully separated lanes off vehicular streets, which is kind of that sketch that we just showed. It's separated from vehicles. Integrated into all streets as shared facilities would be, it might be protected, but it might not be. It might just be a picture of a person on a bike. Or prioritized on major streets only. So those are some options there that you can vote for. Preferences for bike lanes. This is helping us in a conversation that we need to get deeper on with those that bike or are interested in biking in the future about where bike lanes are most appropriate. Is it more important to feel safe and therefore be off-road away from vehicles, or is it more important to be able to access everything but you might have times where you're sharing the road with vehicles that are moving pretty quickly. And so we're still trying to kind of tease that out, and it will be kind of a short, medium, long-term phasing of bike lanes as they come online on the East Bank. So this is just kind of our beginning of us uncovering what the priorities are for folks. Yes.
I'm a native Nashvillian. My concern with meetings that are public include non-inclusion of individuals who do not use cell phones as an option. So if we are not cell phone users, how do we gain equal access and opportunity, number one, to your information, and number two, to responding to your queries? Because now we've got this divisiveness, and we don't have the same access as the rest of you. So what are you doing?
So we have, I think maybe you came in a little later, we have paper copies of this survey. So if you'll, oh, you.
It's also fundamental. We've got school systems with third grade reading operations, and we don't have an opportunity. I just want to know what other options for inclusion, please, so that everybody has the same opportunity. Black, white, Jew, Gentile, green, purple, Russian, doesn't matter. What do we have? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, if you came in late and you don't have a smartphone, we have paper copies. If you're unable to get to this tonight or just don't want to, we have our East Bank email address, and you can catch me at the end and happy to set up future meetings. But let me pull up, yes.
They can help you enlarge your information so that it is eligible, legible, visible, and they can also provide you with a signing interpreter for any meeting that you hold. So if anybody's deaf or hard of hearing, you have that access. I just want the public to know it's a free service, and you're not including what we have in Nashville free of charge. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, this is, okay. All right, thank you. We do have a Q&A. I should say, we are going to try to use the bulk of this meeting for Q&A. So if you do, did you have, Alan, did you want to ask a question? Yeah, and I think that's the kind of, that's where we're at with starting to share some concepts that we're exploring and kind of seeing what's rising to the top, but also meeting with the bike community and bike and transportation planners to try to understand, does the long term, the very final finished product for biking include all of these? Where do we start? What's the first most important thing? And maybe it is the desire for fully separated bikeways. But we're going to explore that further. This is kind of a crude art tonight of just showing and getting some very quick feedback and reactions. But it does help give us guidance and direction. So we have one more question on bikes. And again, this is kind of that you can have up to 3 answers for this one. So I will give a few moments for those results to come in. I'm not going to close the voting. You can take as long as you want. We're just going to try to show some of those as they're coming in. So what things are missing: lighting, pedestrians, dogs, transit. Yeah, keep them coming in. Like I said, the bigger the word that you see on there, the more times that's been typed in by someone. So those are our bike questions, and we will switch back to the PowerPoint, I hope. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention when you did it last time. What do I need to do to get back? Oh, okay. Oh, this is so weird. Okay. Thank you. I'll probably forget next time. Okay. Okay, so next concept for review is Greenways. And so we have in Plan to Play the Greenway system mapped out for the future, and it includes the inset that you see on the right, which would be greenways throughout the East Bank that connect up to River North and ultimately over to Germantown and around downtown and create an entire loop around our downtown from Shelby all the way up. And so that's what's planned. What we have today is this. So we have Greenway on the West Bank, and then it's not shown on this graphic just yet, but there is some Greenway along Cumberland Park and in front of Nissan Stadium. And then these are the two existing parks, Cumberland Park on the East Bank, and then Riverfront Park on the other side of the river. So the concept we're exploring is that green front door along the river, is adding green space and a publicly accessible waterfront. And then to layer into that a trail system that would fill in that gap and create that loop around downtown, but also create trails and green connections off into East Nashville neighborhoods over to Frederick Douglass Park and McFerrin Park and Cleveland Park. And so that the Greenway system could really be used for commuting and transportation and not just for leisure activities. So let's go back to the Mentimeter questions. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so first question. Would having a Greenway system that connected various destinations around the East Bank encourage you to use the Greenway system more often? And yeah, feel free to keep voting. That's definitely a resounding yes for that concept of creating that green access, greenway access along the river. This is kind of like the word cloud question, but is there a route or destination not shown on this concept map that should be included? Okay, yes, and keep typing them in. This is really useful information for us to take away and discuss with Metro Parks and Greenways for Nashville and other entities that really work in this space. Trying to get back to my PowerPoint. I'm so sorry, guys. I feel like I try really hard with technology and then it just is not my friend. I'm trying to copy what he just did and it's not working. Well, I came off the screen. Oh, it wouldn't let me. Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh dear. Okay. Next concept, public open space and the riverfront. So diving a little more deeply into that, Greenway is to consider kind of the different public spaces and open space that could be along the waterfront, which could range in scale. We have some precedents with our neighbors in Chattanooga of a riverfront landing, which is kind of a public open space, but is somewhat formal open space. We also have the idea of neighborhood parks. And so for those future neighborhoods on the East Bank, those smaller neighborhood gathering spaces. That performative landscape park, which is kind of a fancy term for a place that is floodable and serves a function dealing in storm conditions, but also when it's dry is a space that folks can enjoy. And so here's a sketch that kind of incorporates all of those things with a kind of more formal park space that brings you close to the waterfront. In the background, greenways and floodable landscapes and greenways and bikeways throughout there. So again, some places to gather along the water's edge with resilient landscapes that are able to make room for the river and manage flooding where necessary, but also more opportunities to get down and engage with the river than we have today. So we have a few questions on this. Okay, so do you like the concept shown of a publicly accessible riverfront along the East Bank? Okay, and that's a overwhelming yes for now. And then what of those types of public spaces that we showed, the neighborhood parks, the performative landscape, the riverfront landing, or something else, which are most exciting for you? Which is the most exciting one that you would really like to see come to fruition on the East Bank? Okay. Got a little race going on for neighborhood parks and riverfront landing. So please continue to vote. But again, this is really useful feedback for us to see and to take back to the Parks Department and the consultants and designers that we're working with to kind of refine the concept some more and bring back ideas to you. And then finally, what's missing from this sketch? All right, and yeah, take your time typing these in. Again, I'm just showing kind of glimpses of it so we can keep things moving along tonight, but the voting remains open, so at any point that you're doing this, feel free to give your feedback, and we'll keep reviewing and eventually close the voting and use this input to refine the concepts that we're showing tonight. But definitely see some of the top things right now: dining, lighting, docks, something for the kids. Okay, second to last concept, we're getting there. Thank you for your patience with me as I figure this out. You can see what a slow learner I am, is to think about cross-river connections. And using the assets we have with our bridges in a positive way and how those could be improved for the future. So we have today our two bridges that are really close together, James Robertson and Woodland. Here's a photo of looking at James Robertson. And exploring concepts for adding pedestrian and bike access on those bridges to really utilize those bridges more for folks. And so we looked at some examples in Boston and in Sacramento where they've either built on an additional lane, so it's like a cantilevered lane built onto the bridge for pedestrian and bike access, or they have restriped existing lanes to provide pedestrian and bike access. And so these are examples from around the country. And here's the aerial view we have today of our bridges and the connectivity they provide to downtown. And here's a very high-level concept. Don't pay so much attention to the architecture, but more to the concepts around increasing multimodal connectivity on the bridges and using space underneath the bridges for parking, for floatable landscape, and so that you can build on top of those. So those concepts around accommodating bikes and pedestrians on bridges and transforming our bridges to be more welcoming places for those modes of transportation. And so we will have a couple of questions for you on the Mentimeter. So would improved bike and pedestrian facilities on the bridges encourage you to travel between the East Bank and downtown? Yes. And what do you think about the concept of having new buildings between the bridges that use the area below for parking, for floatable landscapes? I think you have a voting option for that. What do you think about those concepts? Again, very high level emerging concept, the idea of the existing height that we have at our bridges and the existing infrastructure and how we might use that better in the future. Okay, so some positive feedback for that. All right, and so our final Mentimeter question and our final concept is to show an overall vision for the East Bank and kind of tie in all the different concepts that we've begun to explore with you tonight. So we have the existing condition of the East Bank, the existing aerial, and we have a sketched concept of some ideas for the future that includes new public infrastructure like the Multimodal Boulevard, new mixed-use development within a walkable street grid. And so it is trying to summarize all of the different concepts that we've talked about tonight. So bikes and greenways, an activated publicly accessible riverfront, a multimodal boulevard to move traffic, residential streets for the new neighborhoods on the East Bank, neighborhood parks, transit-oriented development, a diversity of housing types, and green streets and resilient landscapes. So again, don't consider so much the architecture, but just the concepts that are emerging from the feedback that we've received from the public. And I will move us over to the Mentimeter for the last set of questions. Yeah.
What agencies have you surveyed or received feedback from, including Public Works, Corps of Engineers, Architectural Department, our Codes Department? Have you surveyed them, received information for them, so that even if we're choosing our designs and concepts, are they functional? So that we're not reaching outside of the box and putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, and that's a great question, yeah. And so, yes, absolutely. So we work closely with the Army Corps of Engineers. They're doing floodplain modeling and analysis for us of where the vulnerabilities are on the East Bank and how to appropriately plan around future infrastructure and future housing so that we're doing it in a safe way. NDOT, our Public Works Department, is on our planning team for this study, along with the Codes Department, TDOT, Parks Department. There's a huge range. We've had over 150 technical meetings with all the relevant agencies to ensure that when we show a concept, it's not completely pie in the sky, that this is something that could potentially happen. And tonight, we're showing sketches to kind of put some visuals for the public around those concepts. Oh, yes, yes. And like I said, these are our last voting questions, and then we are going to get to the Q&A portion. So we'll just do this last question, and then we'll. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with that said, I need to see that feedback, because I want to know, sorry, Sean, I love you, but council cannot vote on something, your feedback is new, if we're only talking about Nashville government land. Thank you for letting me interrupt, I love you all.
Yeah, so Rochelle, for the WebEx, the questions were just around, are we including technical review from municipal, state, and local agencies? And yes, absolutely. It's part of why the process can sometimes take a lot of time, because we're doing a lot of vetting at a lot of different levels to ensure that the things that we discuss in the public format are reasonable concepts that we can take forward and work with our partnering agencies on. And so we've been very fortunate to have great partners to do this work. So from all of those concepts that were shown, do you feel like we're on the right, ooh, I'm sorry, let me go back. Let's show the results. Okay, yes, the feedback is that you do feel like we're on the right track, which is very encouraging. Of the concepts shown tonight, which ones are most exciting to you? Please select two. Very helpful feedback for us to see what's most interesting and exciting for the community. Okay, and this is great. The boulevard and the overall vision so far rising to the top. It's helpful for us to get quick feedback on the directions that we're going in. And then finally, what's missing from this sketch? What are we missing? All right. A school, working people, affordable housing. Please keep typing those in. Again, the voting is not closed, just what we're showing up on the screen today. I'm going to move back over to the PowerPoint and invite Lucy to come back up to just quickly give an overview of what's next. And then we're going to open up the Q&A portion. So I want to thank you for your patience with me and the technology. You've been very gracious, and we won't have to go through that again, I don't think. So I'll pass it to Lucy.
Anna, thank you. You did a nice job. We need to have that music, the Jeopardy music on while you're up here struggling by yourself, trying to figure this out. Well, so thank you so much for the feedback so far. We are going into a Q&A portion where we're going to perch up here on chairs and answer questions and get additional, more refined feedback about what you're seeing and what you're not seeing. I did just want to talk a little bit about sort of immediately the next steps that we are pursuing. And so the first is we are going to analyze the feedback we've gotten already and then the feedback you give us during the Q&A portion, and that will help us to continue to revise and refine the concepts that you see. And as we come back to you, you will see increasingly more detailed proposals for how to build out the East Bank. Refining the mobility network, in my opinion, this is one of the most critical and foremost challenges that we have on the East Bank is the lack of a mobility network. And we've tried to sort of explain some of those gaps and where we think we need to go to address the need for a multimodal network over here to serve the community. When I first started talking with residents and heard that there was a really strong interest in building more housing, more mixed-use development and the like on the East Bank, I knew, and we knew at the department, that the best way to ensure that we can do that safely and thoughtfully is through that mobility network. And so to me, while I know lots of folks want to talk about the land uses and the more interesting items, the mobility network may not be a passionate interest or topic. This is really central because I feel an obligation to commit to Nashvillians, to our leadership at council and in the administration, that if we do diversify the land uses here, that we're doing so in a safe way, in a way that's equitable. And so we're going to continue to refine that mobility network and then refine the open space plan based on some of the feedback that we've gotten here. And so, part of what you'll begin to see is our thinking in phases and how you build out this area over time, and your feedback will help us accomplish that. So we've heard a lot of comments about the importance of housing on the East Bank and the importance of affordable housing. We agree. I am assuming that we are able to continue to define a mobility network that will support housing and affordable housing uses. It's my goal to provide a recommendation for housing on the East Bank with affordability numbers as well. I think it's also really important to look more broadly at the entire neighborhood and area within the East Bank. It's not just in isolation. We're focusing a lot on Casey Place, for example, and ensuring that there's really outstanding connectivity between that neighborhood and the amenities that we build here. We understand the important sort of economic relationships there. And so we're looking at best practices in terms of building communities and neighborhoods where there is some environmental risk, and I think that's really important for us to better understand. We want to make sure that the mobility network can support those kinds of uses and obviously use best practices. And so that's something we've heard, we hear you, we are working to address those comments. We understand how important it is. We've heard questions about whether the planning department would ever support single family uses on the East Bank. The answer is no. You will never see the planning department make that recommendation. Obviously, uses are ultimately up to our council members, and they're here tonight, but that's not something that I would recommend. We're going to recommend a diversity of housing and types on the East Bank. And so we're continuing to refine our thinking on that. Establishing flood protection and sustainability standards, to me, is part of that. Today, what we have on the East Bank is parking lots, manufacturing, obviously the sports stadium. If we are going to provide for the diversity of uses, we have to do it safely and equitably. And so that's why we've been focusing on the mobility and the flood protection work. I'm really interested to get your feedback tonight on some of the ideas around using our bridges in a different way. When we put that slide up there, I thought, I have no idea what people are going to say to this. And so that's one, I'm really interested to hear if you think this is a good idea, if you think we're being thoughtful about it. I want to hear. And then, eventually we will get to a place where we're looking at development proposals in this area. We're not there yet. The council members have been supportive and helpful on that front, so we would have time to do this master planning, but that's further into the future. And so with that, are we bringing chairs up? Are we standing? Do you want to stand? Okay. The council members have agreed to come up and join us, but we'll, we can just roll with it.
I was just gonna get us set up for the questions first. Because we're gonna kind of rotate between questions from in-person and questions on the WebEx. So Rochelle, who's the PIO, Public Information Officer for Planning, is taking questions on the WebEx. And so she will read those out to us. And then Sean and Jared with the Planning Department have microphones. And so if you'll raise your hand, we will try to get to everyone. It might be most efficient if we start with a question from Rochelle while folks are raising their hands and we're getting mics to other people. Try to not repeat a question and be succinct in your questions so we can get to them all. And if we don't, we'll follow up with you afterwards, particularly if you're on the WebEx. We'll keep a record of the Q&A. So let's start with Rochelle's first question.
And Anna, I'll just clarify for everyone, we're gonna hold the mic for you so that everyone's not having to touch the same microphone. So we'll just do that, but I'm gonna do that for everyone.
So this first one, it actually came in through email, but it says, for a healthy downtown, a balance needs to be maintained for all users. What are the thoughts on creating a place for a local and regional audience and not geared toward the out-of-state visitor?
I'll take a stab at that one. First, one of the reasons we've held 18, now 19 public meetings is to hear from Nashvillians what you want to see here. And, the elements that you see here are the kind of framework for building a great community, but we have a lot of work to do. There are things like that I've heard, like can we require, local restaurants or businesses only instead of chains and things like that. I think I'm really interested in exploring those ideas. Those are a little further down the road, but there are a lot of ways I think that we can look at how to build a place that feels authentic to this city. We're considering everything from looking at the streetscape standards in a way that uses native trees to our community so it feels more like home. I mean, there's subtle things like that. The landscape architects among us will understand. And then there are things around the economy and sort of the look and feel of the area that we think are really important to build out over time. We've had a lot of ideas around cultural uses that would serve the community. We've received feedback for children's museum and children's spaces and things like that. And all of those will be evaluated as we continue to move forward. And so, I think that there are a lot of different dimensions. One thing I would say is I haven't heard from Nashvillians that they necessarily want this to feel like an extension of downtown, that this is East Nashville, it is also downtown. There's an important neighborhood context, and you'll see in the way that we imagined the greenways and the streets, they relate in some way to East Nashville because we want it to reference the history of the city so it doesn't feel like a spaceship has landed. Is there anything you guys would want to say on that?
But I think the emphasis on housing overall, of course, we could have folks that relocate from somewhere else in East Nashville or other areas to that neighborhood, but it will be its own neighborhood primarily. I think that's a lot of the emphasis on housing is that we have so much housing demand in the city that this will be an important location where we can absorb some of that and really create a whole new neighborhood there where none exists today. We can't ever stop out-of-town tourists from coming to places. And in fact, if you speak to our 5 Points business owners, they depend on a lot of tourism that comes and supports all the boutique little small businesses that we all love so much. they have a lot of neighborhood support, but they also rely on out-of-town folks to come and support their businesses too. You'll never be able to stop that per se, but you haven't seen anything in the feedback that we've received to date, or even in today's presentation, that turns it into a theme park, for instance, or anything like that. It's all about building a neighborhood there. Probably will have some work opportunities, probably some great restaurants that everyone will want to go to, or things like that. But one of the things that I was really impressed by when we had the public meetings at the Bridge Building was that the number one item that folks said that they were interested in for open space was nature trails. So people really sort of want to see an extension of something like Shelby Bottoms Greenway. I mean, that's really, now of course people can come from everywhere and enjoy that too, but to me that was a really telling thing that folks said that they wanted to see locally, is that they wanted to see more nature trail type of amenities, and also connections to Shelby Park, obviously, which you can get there now, but it's an inhospitable environment to get there. But to really have that connectivity all the way up and down, I think is something that folks from all over Nashville actually use that greenway today, even in its current state. But I think that'll really be a real quality of life enhancement for Nashvillians who live here, to use that nature extension that we're hoping to come up with.
All right, next question from the audience. Sean, yeah, there you go.
Hi, it's me. My name's Whitney. I live here in District 5, and I don't want to be the person who does, this is a little bit more of a comment than a question, but I'm thrilled with so many of the thoughtful touches in this, especially the resiliency and affordable housing considerations that I hope will remain. My biggest problem, though, is that right now we are also going through a redistricting process, and with the current way that redistricting is being proposed, the 2 council members standing on stage would no longer have any representation over this district, nor would we. And if you're asking us for our feedback now, and then going to be removing the elected officials who we elected to steward our relationship with this city, that seems kind of insane, especially given that you just said this is important to be part of East Nashville. We deserve a voice in this. So can you fix that for us?
I guess I should have been prepared to talk about redistricting. So we have released two, and we have a third one that's going to come out that will reflect public feedback. There have been lots of discussions, as you know, about districts 5 and 6, as well as some of the areas in the northern portions of the county, which they've grown, but just not as quickly as the center and the southeastern portions of the county. So the thinking behind, first of all, from a planning department perspective, every member of the public has a voice, and we hear and take that feedback into account. We very much care about the council members and their feedback to us, but when we hold these public meetings, I never start and say, who's from this district and who's from this district? We take your feedback as all equal and part of something that we have to weigh. The thought on the East Bank and the downtown portion of the city is that during the work on the West Bank, recovering from the explosion, a lot of the feedback and work that we've been trying to think through is how to create an environment where we don't think of the river so much as an obstacle anymore, and that we have common goals around engaging the riverfront on both sides and doing so in a planning way. And it's a little more consistent with the planning boundaries. But that's the thought. We're releasing the next plan, I think Rochelle, do you know, is it tomorrow? Friday. And so you will see how we have responded to the public feedback. But thank you so much. I hear you. And we are evaluating all the feedback that we've gotten. Yes, Councilman.
I know my colleague and I have worked very closely together on this for the East Bank, because it does primarily fall within Districts 5 and 6. What I would encourage the folks to think about, though, is that we do have presently a community advisory group, which includes neighborhood representatives, institutional, organizational representatives. And right now, that also includes the Downtown Residents Association. It is not the case that because none of the East Bank is in 19, that folks in District 19 have no voice. That's not true today. Councilmember O'Connell defers to the two council members today, but we all work together very well and very closely, and we know that having a successful riverfront benefits not only all of the riverfront adjacent districts, but the whole county. And so I want to kind of put folks at ease a little bit about that, to say that just because in 2 years a location may be in a different district doesn't mean you don't have a voice today, and doesn't mean that you won't have a voice then. There is a very diligent planning activity that we've done with a lot of organizations currently, and I think the day will come when the East Bank will be its own neighborhood, frankly. And it will sort of emerge as its own neighborhood. And so I just don't want folks to get fixated too much on a line. I think Councilmember Parker and I work very closely together along Main Street in Gallatin, for instance. There are a lot of things that happen in East Nashville that all of the East Nashville council members have worked together on. And we know that having, for instance, a very vibrant Gallatin Pike benefits all of East Nashville. I think that's going to continue regardless of where that line is drawn. Thank you.
Okay, and then Rochelle or Jared, okay.
Hi, I also want to just commend you all. This is not my first meeting. I think it was at the first one too. And I know how committed all of you are to this effort, how many hours you're putting in. I think we all appreciate that. And we thank you for the opportunity to express ourselves. I've been in Nashville for 35 plus years. I've lived in East Nashville all of those years. I think you're going to have some challenges and some, things you have to tease through, like Imagine East Bank. Well, is that Imagine East Bank for East Bankers, or is it Imagine East Bank for all of Nashville? We have one river, folks. That's the natural resource that's for all of us. It's not just for East Bank. Clearly, East Bankers have an interest. But, wouldn't it, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, how to enjoy the river and let the river be the river. So it's like, I don't see that happening yet. I want to just put out there because, and I know you said don't pay attention to the architecture, but you know what? Then don't show the pictures. Just a tip. But you know what? If it's going to be looking at all that dense, I'm out of here. Just like I've not been to the Gulch, I've not been to 12 South, I won't go, I'd love to go, but it's now, just like so many other places, become either for tourists who are willing to put up with all of the traffic and the no parking and the whatever, or those who live in the neighborhood and who can walk or bike. Well, East Bank, maybe I can bike. On a good day I can. But there's going to be a lot of people who can't, who live in East Nashville. So, this idea of having a green space, and I see little green dots just like hugging the river, and then density like way right behind it, count me out. I can't even, now some of you can figure out, but I would guess that you'd need at least 3 blocks deep, and I mean 3 normal blocks, 3 to 5 blocks deep to make that a decent green space where people can go and feel like they can take a deep breath, get away from all of the hubbub on the other side of the river and maybe in their own communities, and enjoy the river. I think we're missing something here. I think we're focused, there's this contrast, understandably, between river and development. And they don't, there's going to be conflicts there. And I guess I'm siding with the river. Oh,
So I'm going to,
go
ahead.
One last thing. The corridor road, that bothers me too, because, depending on where it is, how, there's conditions there. I don't know. I admit that. However, corridors, what they become? Fast tracks for people who just want to get fast from point A to point B. They're not interested in stopping off and enjoying the river or the development. So I don't know exactly how the concept of this corridor is going to go, but I would just be wary of something that just becomes a nice cut through for people. Thank you.
That's great. So I will take, of the 2 comments, I think your first one is more green space and more green space on the river. And so we will take that into account. The question about development, I think, is one we have to figure out how to balance, because we've definitely heard from lots of feedback here that we want uses that are alternative to manufacturing or a single sports facility or what have you. And so we can have a discussion about the height and the density. I will say that the existing zoning on the East Bank is somewhat uneven. So what folks can do today, regardless, there is some intense zoning already. And so part of our strategy is to manage that growth in a way that is really thoughtful. The goal of the boulevard is to put cars dead last in our pecking order, right? Sidewalks, green spaces, multimodal functions such as buses. I think mode is something we'll have to discuss later. But at this point, we're trying to figure out how you manage the development in a way that does what you're talking about, which is we don't want to fast cut through here. And there are lots of ways through design to accomplish that. And so we'll put that into the feedback that you don't want the multimodal boulevard to be fast. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think what I'm hearing you say is you don't want it to be car oriented and you want to see more river engagement. So that's great feedback. Okay, there's some questions up here.
So we're gonna take one from the virtual space, and then we saw a few hands in the middle. So we'll make our way around, but we're gonna keep alternating. So one from our online participants.
So this is they're related. One comes from Lee and one comes from Craig. Based on the vision for reducing surface parking around Nissan Stadium, what is the plan to purchase capture land for development? Are Titans amenable to reducing the parking lots around the stadium? And there was a lot of conversation that occurred around talking with TDOT, NDOT, et cetera. But have we had any conversations with the Titans?
It's a little hard to hear, but I think the question was, have we had conversations with the Titans? How are we working with the Titans? And the answer is yes, absolutely. The Titans have been a wonderful partner with us. They're here tonight, and they have been at every public meeting that we've held, hearing the exact same feedback that we're hearing. So yes, there's a deep relationship there to work closely with them. I think the council member whose district the stadium is in also has a relationship. Did you want to speak to that or at all?
No, that's absolutely correct. I think one thing that's a little bit important to think about the surface parking lots is that the Titans have, actually not even the Titans themselves, but the PSL holders basically have that space during game days, right? At least as things currently are. A lot of the rest of the time, there's a lot of demand for those parking lots as we have them today, as you know, if you drive by or take a bus or commute. So I think the real question, which is the good question, is how do you add all of this stuff on the East Bank and still accommodate that parking demand that we know is still there too at the same time, right? And so that's where you kind of get into the engineering side of, you would probably have, instead of surface lots, you would have more parking garages that hopefully would be wrapped with housing and other uses probably, but that is a little bit further along in the analysis after we get that kind of street grid network worked out.
The only other thing I would add is during this first phase, our goal has been to work with as many property owners as will meet with us on the East Bank. So that includes the Titans, but they're not the only ones. And so what we're really focusing on at this point is mobility, greenways, green spaces, and how to set up a framework to support the diversity of uses that we're hearing are of interest to the community. And so that's been our focus. When you have that broader community perspective, then it becomes much easier to have a conversation about parking for individual uses, whether they're the Titans or anyone else on the East Bank. So the goal is really to focus more broadly on that work. And so part of the analysis we've been doing has been with traffic engineers and the like to help give us some feedback about the mix of uses and how you balance those needs. But we wanted to make sure that we're approaching this from a perspective that is community oriented, not necessarily to any individual user, although you have to acknowledge that there are users that use the space in a different way.
Hey, how you all doing today?
Hello.
I have heard the word affordable housing used a lot today. Could you all define affordable housing for the people in the virtual world and the people in the stands, in the audience? Because the analytics on affordable housing, you have to make a yearly salary of $23,000. So can we get a grasp on what you all define affordable housing?
So the way the planning department and the way that we imagined this project to begin with was, again, looking at how you would transform an area that is for manufacturing and other uses into something that could just support housing as a first step, right? And while that sounds kind of maybe mundane or not a particularly big leap, it's really important in an area that has no infrastructure. And so on the affordable housing front, we've looked at best practices in other cities to better understand how large areas like this redevelop with affordable housing sort of at the very top of mind. And, they break it out into 60 to 80% of area median income or income that is below that. And there are lots of different ways to address housing need. And it strikes me that one size does not fit all. And so we have partners at MDHA, for example, and the nonprofit affordable housing community who can help us better define how you support each of those income levels. We're just not there yet with a recommendation here. I don't think it's something where we can just draw a line around the East Bank and say, this is what the exact tool is going to be. I think you have to look at the broader community. You have to look at what the needs of the community and those residents are, and then define those parameters. But I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to define it as, 60% and below or what have you. I think it's a more complex question and something that we are very earnestly working through today. Sure, so we have recommendations from the Affordable Housing Task Force that define need in unit counts, that define need based on those area median income levels, that told us where resources needed to be directed, such as to the Barnes Fund. We have partners at MDHA who are part of our technical task force, and we also have consultants who work in lots of communities throughout the country who know about building a diversity of housing. And they've looked at the market here and have given us some advice, and which is something we're still working through.
All right. Oh, yeah, Councilman Parker.
Thank you. And so to your original question about, how are we defining affordable housing? I think as Director Kempf pointed out, we sort of put it in these different buckets, 0 to 30, which is like the deeply affordable, 30% of AMI up to 60, and then above that. One thing to keep in mind with the AMI figure, I think it can surprise us sometimes when we look at those numbers, because that is an area that is not, say, East Nashville's area median income. That is, I believe the HUD-defined area is the metropolitan statistical area, which includes some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country. So those numbers are being factored in. So I think that, sometimes in our thinking we talk about 0 to 30 and we have an idea of what that is, but I think that working single parents and folks like that are falling into that category more than folks might imagine. So I do definitely think we should take a look across the spectrum as we develop a strategy for this. So that's a great question. Thank you.
And if I can tag onto that as well, I want to say I love all the passion in Nashville for affordable housing. And this is one project. And we need affordable housing all throughout this county. And I think if folks are really advocates, and I know that you are, for affordable housing, that you're going to advocate for affordable housing all the time and in all parts of the county, right? And so like the East Bank could contribute some additional affordable housing to our inventory, which we need, but we cannot have one project or one specific part of the county that absorbs all of the affordable housing need for the whole county, right? Like, we all have to be in this together. I know that if you go to the Casey homes, we have already added a net increase over our 1-for-1 replacement of affordable units. We've already added about 100 additional units in Casey. any day now, because I've been working on this for 2.5 years, but at 5th and Shelby, we're going to break ground on 200 affordable housing units for below 60% of the area median income. That will also include a partnership with a Samaritan recovery community that's operated there since 1964. It's a really great opportunity for a really long-established East Nashville organization to branch out and provide more bed space for more of our neighbors who have need, plus add 200 affordable housing units right at the cusp of the East Bank. Councilmember Parker has some projects that are coming on along Dickerson, just under that new bridge at Cleveland. There's about 250 units that are going there. You go up Dickerson Road, there's the Skyliner with Urban Housing Solutions. It's a couple hundred units. Go further up, just Dickerson Road. Councilmember Van Rees has worked with several developers and nonprofit partners to put affordable housing up there. That's kind of what it is. Like, we don't need all of the affordable housing to all be in one specific location. We need it throughout the county, especially along the corridors. And I know that myself, Councilmember Parker, Councilmember Van Rees, Councilmember Toombs, all along that corridor, kind of adjacent to the East Bank, we have been working for several years now to continue adding inventory that's already going to be coming online pretty soon. Just wanted folks to kind of keep that in mind, that like we need it interspersed throughout the county, but the whole county needs to work together on affordable housing. And sometimes when you have projects, even like the one that I've worked for a while at 5th and Shelby, sometimes when you look at the infrastructure cost to support housing where there was not housing before, that infrastructure cost is enormously expensive, and that makes providing affordable housing very, very difficult. And so as a result, that affordable housing needs a deeper and deeper and deeper subsidy to get fewer and fewer units. So this is where I think it's really important, what Director Kempf has said, is that working with experts locally as well as nationally to see how you can make these numbers work, to get the most units that we can get throughout the county in good locations where we can connect people to transit is a better solution than fixating everything on one specific spot in order to meet our county's needs.
All right, do we have a virtual question or another one from the room? Okay, from the room, there we go.
We've got another one from the room. I'm probably in your shadow. And we've seen some other hands. So if you've had your hand up, don't worry, we're going to get around. I've seen one over here and maybe one more in the center, and we'll check the back. But we've got one here for now.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to a point you made earlier about prioritizing modes of travel and particularly the speed. As a longtime East Nashville to downtown e-bike commuter, that's a particular hot spot right now and I also wondered if you could tell me about the kind of speed that is conceptualized for this, Multimodal Boulevard, and also the cross river arteries, and particularly how the designation of Greenway and bike path might play into the where people can go.
So we probably don't have yet the level of detail that says speed and what that should be, but what we've heard from people is they want to create a neighborhood here. And when I think about that, I don't think of a big thoroughfare for cars. I think of something that serves a lot of different users. If you disagree with me, let me know. Yeah, no, that's great. Oh my gosh. Right. So at this, that's terrible. That's terrible. I'm so glad you're mobile and living to tell us about it. I will say one thing we're really deeply focused on right now is the function of the various facilities. And so for example, the Multimodal Boulevard, we understand needs to have different modes such as bus service and bus stations that are actually covered, right, and not open to the elements. Bike facilities, this is a phenomenal opportunity to do a really exceptional bike lane and bike facility in the city, multiple ones throughout the East Bank. One of the key things, and this is not particularly sexy, but I'll tell you it really matters from a health, safety, life perspective, is access. And we are really carefully managing our thinking around access to the boulevard, because the more conflicts you create between cars and people, the more experiences folks have like what you experienced. And we want to avoid that. We want people to go to the East Bank and feel like they can easily move about the area in a way that feels really good and safe. And so there are a lot of engineering things that we're looking at to make sure that that can happen. One of the reasons we were asking, and I know there was some frustration about the bike questions, because clearly you can design protected bike facilities really well in a lot of different ways. I am committed to delivering that for this community because I think it's so important. And so, some of the examples we showed are in part because we just want to get your gut reaction. We make assumptions as planners that don't necessarily play out right for the public. And so we need to hear that feedback. And so I think if you have ideas or thoughts about how those modes function, we're welcome and open to hearing them. But I'm not this is not a fast thoroughfare. This is something that's slow, that's for a neighborhood, but that helps people move about the area in a safe way.
You're a biker, right? I am. I bike for fun and for utility. So thank you so much for the question. As Lucy said, there's a number of ways that facilities can be designed. I think that something we're going to be looking at closely as we advance these plans is, we obviously want those wide, commercially activated sidewalks, and we're kind of looking at, are we going to do the elevated along with the sidewalk type bike facilities? I've been very clear about some examples in the city that I don't think do a super great job of that, where it's really just the sidewalk and the bike lane are integrated, and if you have a commercially activated sidewalk, it's going to be a mess and introduce sort of downward conflict points for the cyclists with pedestrians. But I think there's ways to do that right. I think there's ways to integrate it directly onto the street well. And I would ask, especially folks who do bike in this city, please stay engaged with the process and please keep giving us feedback, because, we have the firsthand experience of what it's like. We also, we want to hear from people who maybe aren't biking in the city. Maybe you bought a bike and you put it in your car and take it down to Shelby and you feel comfortable doing that, but you're not quite ready to get out on the street. We want to hear from you what's going to make you comfortable getting out on the street. And that's super important to hear as well. Just on the multimodal thing broadly, the question of that, when I see that, and we've just started kind of, this is the first time seeing of a lot of this, so we're just starting to have these conversations. I see we have this plan for a tremendous, transit. I'm seeing, the dedicated lanes, this back and forth along the East Bank area. I think that it's going to afford us maybe an opportunity to demonstrate some arrangements with bus rapid and whatnot that can work elsewhere. And we might want to look at how is that network expanded, so it's not just, I can get from the Oracle campus to Shelby Park on a super quick bus. It's more like, this is part of a new, I don't know if it's a loop, I don't know if it involves KVB or other routes, but again, it's just a tremendously exciting opportunity to have sort of the blank slate and be able to get something right as a proof of concept in this city. So again, transit advocates, cyclists, pedestrians, everybody, please stay involved and keep giving us that feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, what Councilmember Parker said is just so important that not only is it a chance to do a proof of concept, but potentially, if we think big enough, this could be a really important component to an overall countywide transit network, where even if it's on a bus, I know some folks in Tennessee, for whatever reason, don't like trains, but even on a bus network that you could get really across a good part of town on one bus, maybe, and very rapidly, much more quickly than you could even today in a car, if we design it right and plan well for the future. From the public standpoint, one of the slides talked about TDOT's working with us, we hope, to do some right-of-way acquisition. Right-of-way acquisition is not free, but that's why we're coming out to the public, because when we need to acquire right-of-way, we want to make sure that we have a lot of good public feedback into what we're using that right-of-way for. Sometimes the more amenities, the wider sidewalks, the wider planting strips, the more trees, the more things like that that you want in that street, the wider that right-of-way need gets. So just want everyone to think about that. But that's why it's so important to get this public feedback, that as we and in planning and on council, begin the work of figuring out what the right-of-way need is, that we really have public support for that acquisition and for what the design is going to be so that you, the residents of the county, will use it.
All right, Sean?
Yeah, we're gonna take one from the virtual space, and then we've seen the hands in the room, so we're gonna get to these couple of folks down front who've been waiting patiently, but.
All right, so this is kind of a combo from Pete and Ryan. They want to know, can you give us an idea on the overall timing when the final plan will be completed? And additionally, can we expect any improvements in this area in the meantime?
So the bike space is one where I would really like to see short, medium, and long-term objectives because there's a lot of desire to move about this area by bike. And so we're really looking forward to talking to cyclists about what an interim step might look like, and then medium and long-term, and how to make those investments to realize that vision over time. And so I would say what we're doing right now is making sure with the departments, we had a question earlier about whether we're talking to the utilities and the departments who deliver infrastructure. We are, and we, I think, would expect to have basic improvements with any development proposed in the area. And so, but that's part of the development review process. So, I'm sorry, you asked another question. It started with the second part. Can you?
The overall timing of
Overall
the plan.
timing, yes. And so this first phase is really about laying out the infrastructure needed to support a great neighborhood. And so it is why we have been so focused on mobility, streets, lot and block structure, greenways, parks, and the like. These are sort of basic elements needed to support a different development profile, because what we have today would not support, you know, housing or other kinds of developments that I think folks would like to see. And so the phase one work on that infrastructure assessment, we would like to conclude within the next several months. We want to take feedback from you, refine it, and then present, you know, follow-up concepts based on what we hear today. And so that's kind of an immediate objective for phase one.
And just in the interest of time, I know there's questions in the room, and I think that we're happy to take those questions, but I know that folks are starting to trickle out, so that's fine. And if you want to hold your question and ask us once the meeting's adjourned, that's totally fine too, or you can follow up by email. But just know that we're using the church's space, and so we want to be respectful of that time. So we will try to be succinct in our responses to your questions and follow up with you if needed. So next question.
Good evening. Thank you. One of the questions that I have, you've been talking about creating new neighborhoods. Nashville is horrendous for having food deserts. One of the things that I would like to see, I was over a program at Meharry Medical College, the REACH program, and to have people without access to food, you're creating food deserts. We've got a lot of those as it is. McFerrin Park is one, Cleveland Park is one, Highland Heights is one, right over here in District 5. Are you all planning to, in looking at all these spaces and trying to figure out budgets for buying land, are you looking at buying land for having a small farmer's market maybe? A couple of good grocery stores, because it looks like there's enough room to put in two good grocery stores. We've lost grocery stores over there in that area. There hasn't been a store there in years. The last store pulled out of Cleveland Park was the old, thank God it went away, old Piggly Wiggly on Dickerson Road. But, you know, for some people that didn't have a car, had 3 kids, that was the only thing that they could get to. And I know some of these people personally and the struggles that they have. So that's a big concern for me, and I know a lot of others that I'd like to see happen. If we're going to develop a new neighborhood, let's make sure that we've got the infrastructure there to support grocery stores.
Yes. We've heard the need for some type of grocery, food service. I love the idea of the farmer's market. And so, I do think there's an important community benefit component that is outside some of the lines that you've seen here that are basic infrastructure. And when we have the opportunity to dig into more detailed proposals, we will be putting grocery stores on the table as something that is strongly desired by the community. As much as I wish I could control all of the land uses, I can't compel a major retailer to come, but we can create the conditions where we think it'd be really attractive and talk to those landowners about how important that is. And honestly, with the residential development, that's going to be shown as necessary. Now, the farmers market idea is something that I do think can be more community driven, and I would love to work with the Park Service or the Parks Department. And, if we end up doing a business improvement district or something, figuring out how to program for that space and working with you guys to do it. I love that idea. It's a great, great concept. Good. Okay. Well, send me your information. we would welcome that discussion. I know it's a need. We welcome it.
Okay. Another question from the room.
Well, first of all, my name is Kim Hinton, and I'm super impressed with all the work that you've done. You have very methodically gone through the steps, and you've taken a lot of community input, and I want to applaud you for that. A different idea. You've talked about modal, the way people get around, and one thing is the way they get around on the river. And I would strongly recommend a way to attack the PSC metal issue, which is it's a terrible site. It's going to have to be cleaned up. When you clean it up and you remove the land, you keep going down and you make a beautiful harbor that increases the river frontage of along our river on the east bank. It could be a large circular harbor right where that metal wasteland is, and that would allow the citizens of the east bank and all of Nashville access to canoes, to little boats, to bigger boats, whatever. And it will allow also people to come to downtown Nashville, not on the roads, but on the river. So it's just an idea. Please consider it. And thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And I hope that you've seen through all the feedback we've taken that we're taking the smallest ideas and the biggest ideas. This is a wonderful opportunity to envision in the heart of our city. And so we are vetting all ideas with all the relevant agencies. And ultimately, the ones that are most feasible will rise to the top. But this is not the time to think small. We want to think big and explore as many opportunities as we can. Next question.
So I think we're going to try to do one more from the virtual and then one more that we've seen in the room that's been waiting. And then we'll kind of see where we are with time. But
okay, perfect.
Okay, so this comes from Alex. Some of the slides appear to indicate major changes to the adjacent highway networks, both I-24 and Ellington Parkway. For the panel, what is the intended/ideal relationship between the East Bank and the highway? And will the Spaghetti Junction and Cloverleafs go away, please?
Yes, there's mumbling on the stage of what a good question that is. That is a great question and is something that we, at the beginning of the study, started to pursue and build the relationship with TDOT, who is in charge of those roads, to work with them. I should take my mask off, I'm sorry. I just realized how much I was struggling with it. They are undertaking what they call the inner loop study, so studying the entirety of the inner loop around downtown, which is in perfect timing with our study. And so we were able to provide them with some concepts around rethinking interstate interchanges and the arrival of Ellington, including the spaghetti that was just referenced. And so they have incorporated some of our ideas in their microsimulation modeling. That is some very technical, complex, big, long process that we hope to get results for around February to understand the feasibility and the impact of our ideas on the interstate and Ellington network. So yes, another area where we're thinking really big and partnering at the state level to see what the opportunities are to improve the current function and future function of Ellington and the interstate. Yeah.
The only thing I would add is that we have discovered through a lot of the traffic analysis that we've done is that folks are using the interstate as they would a street. So let's go up to River North or West Trinity. We're just going to jump on the interstate and drive like a quarter of a mile, for example, to River North. That is not an ideal relationship for an interstate. I'll just say that's a bad relationship. And so we've got to figure out alternatives that make people feel more comfortable, that aren't going 60 miles an hour on a, 4 lanes or 5, whatever it is. And I think TDOT is invested in that and interested as well. And I will say, I'm happy to stay here. I know we're running over. If folks want to come to me with questions, I'm happy to do that as well. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see you with the lights. I didn't see you breaking. Okay. But I'll extend that offer for anyone who wants to visit.
All right, I think Kay has the last question.
One more up front.
Yep, go ahead.
Yep, couple of things, just to get this point in. Envision a community where the workers that are providing the services that people want and need can work, can live in the neighborhood and get there easily. That's a vision. I'd like for you to keep that in mind. And the next one goes to using concepts, which are great. But I think what the challenge with that is we can't see, and for people like me that are linear engineer type things, we can't see, well, how many acres will this area of green space encompass to ensure that we are building sustainable environments and allowing for that flood and different uses with the water. What does that look like? How many acres? How many feet back? And then people, all of a sudden, they see high-rise buildings and they go, wait a minute. So that's just one of the challenges with concepts, and also with the boulevard, or whatever you choose, the mobility network. Because with the concepts, we really struggle to get in our minds a picture of, Sean, what would that bike pedestrian function relationship really look like? I mean, some of us have been in Europe, in Amsterdam, you get out of the way of bikers. You just do that. That little bell rings and you go, right? Or you are in areas where they have multimodal lanes just lined up. Walkers, bikers, cars, trains. So you may have that picture in your minds, but the public doesn't have that yet. So whatever could be done to add a little more detail, I think would help probably alleviate some worry and anxiety, because we can't grasp that yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay, and appreciate that. And definitely, as I said, it's not an exact science. Some people are visual processors, some people are more linear, more detailed. Because we're in this early phase, we really are just at the very high level, wanting to check our work stage. There will be more detail coming. It takes time to develop that detail and develop those options, but that detail will be coming. We're just at a very early stage, but thank you for your feedback. And thank you. I think that is it for questions. I want to thank you all for coming and being patient. Sorry we ran long. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Please continue to stay involved, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.